Okay, we're good to go? All right. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone to this workshop, our first workshop of the triennium, and it's a workshop to deal with the Cambridge Connections project. Now, this project will be proceeding under the SPMP committee, and so Mayor Mike has asked me to chair this workshop. In future, it will be under SPMP. Just a very quick word on workshops for those of you not initiated to it. It's a less formal thing. The standing orders don't apply. We don't have quorums, etc. They are still chaired to make them efficient use of everyone's time, but they're a really, really effective way of people coming to grips with issues and getting ready for decision points, and that's what this one is about. There's a decision point coming up on this project at SPMP on 3rd of December. This is essentially the warm-up. So that's workshops. Now, we have lots of people to acknowledge here just to get going as well. So we've got the full council. I've asked Charlotte Fitzpatrick, Chair of the Cambridge Community Board, to join us. It's been our practice for a while now that at workshops, the relevant community board peoples sit here. And I've said to Charlotte, she can speak too. Are there other members of the Cambridge Community Board here or not? I think it's just you. Then we have the Community Reference Group, which are part of this project. I'm going to hand over to Katie just to introduce them to us.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So it's really lovely to have representatives of the Community Reference Group. So this is a group of 15 people who represent the range of interests relevant for this project. So today, if I just run along from one end to the other, so in the far end there, we have Chris Flatt, who's one of our co-chairs. So Chris next, and then Poto Davies. We have Peter Carr, our other co-chair. We have Sharon Creswell, we have Peter Pickett, and we have David Cooney. As well as the 6 here, we have at least 2 online, but I don't know who else has joined online. So there's real interest, and there's just been fantastic support already from the Community Reference Group.
Okay, thanks for that, Katie, and welcome everyone. Sorry I can't fit you at the table, but if there's time at the end, particularly to you co-chairs, I might just ask if you have anything you want to comment on from what you've seen in this workshop, okay? And yeah, I'd really like to acknowledge the work you've been doing. I have been to one Community Reference Group meeting just to see how it was going, and I thought you were going very nicely. Okay, so the point of this workshop essentially is threefold. First, to bring everyone up to speed with the work that has been going on with Cambridge Connections. Second, just to talk about one of the potentially more controversial aspects of Cambridge Connections, which is a potential third river crossing in Cambridge, and we just wanted to set out in a bit more detail what the steps and indicative timing towards completion of that river crossing might look like, okay? And third is to start warming everyone up for this decision point on 3 December at SPMP, which is agreeing the problem statements. Problem statements in a project like this underpin and make the case for the subsequent program of work. So that it's kind of 3 broad subjects there. I see Katie's slides are organised pretty much along those lines. So what I'm going to do is we'll go through each section. If you could just let Katie roll through it, we'll have questions at the end of each section. I have to stick to this 2-hour time limit, okay, people? And the last part, it's the discussion around these problem statements is obviously very important. So if we're spending too much time on any of the earlier ones, I will stop us, and so we can move on to get to the point we need to by the end. Okay, good. Over to you, Katie. Go for it.
Thank you very much. Just before I start, we introduced the Community Reference Group. The other person who we have today with us is Alasdair Gray, who from Gray Matters, and we'll include him in the workshop later around. Alasdair has a lot of experience with Southern Links and Peacocke's Bridge. And so it's a really useful sort of case study when we think about that. So you'll see some of the slides, Alasdair's slides later in the pack. So welcome and thank you for coming along to support us today. All right, let me kick into it. And the slides today are exactly the same as came out to you a week ago, except there's a minor update to two of them, and to deal with a bit of feedback that we had during the week. So just by way of introduction, Cambridge Connections is a 30-year transport plan for Cambridge, recognising that Cambridge sits within the broader district and beyond. We kicked off this phase of work back in August, and so we have a project plan. We have, when we are just about to finish the sort of first phase of the work, and we are working to complete the transport plan by December next year. The timing for that is so that we can come up with both short, medium and long-term initiatives over that 30 years. And the short, being 0 to 3 years, is what we would then put forward for potential funding into the long-term plan, and also through into the regional land transport plan. So that timing is important for the funding cycle for those 3 years. We are working to align ourselves with the NZTA business case approach, and that's very similar to the Treasury business case approach, but slightly bespoke. That has some technical quirks, and you'll see that even when we talk about problem statements, which is a very particular way that NZTA sort of approaches this kind of work. But it's really important that we do follow the process if we want to have access to up to 50% of co-funding from NZTA for the initiatives that come out the other end of the plan. So that's very much guiding our process, and we continue to work with NZTA on the side to make sure that they are comfortable with the process that we are using. And at this early stage, the plan will look at all aspects of transport. That includes public transport, walking and cycling, safety improvements, intersection upgrades, and a new bridge. We are obviously going to focus on the additional bridge as part of the workshop today, because it's the largest capital decision that the council will make. But I really want to keep stressing that it is part of the solution. It's not the only part of what this project really needs to be about, and particularly as it takes a long time to design and then deliver a bridge, there's a number of activities that we need to undertake alongside that to make sure that we actually keep Cambridge moving. This work is a reset of the previous phase of work that was done, and I'd just like to acknowledge the human aspect of the work that's gone on to date, and the real level of community concern that occurred for the first phase of work. And that's been really acknowledged by the previous council that's undertaken the reset. And a couple of the slides that I'll linger on in this kind of introductory piece is a response to learning those lessons from last time, and we'll get to one of the slides around decision making and the other around the community engagement framework. And so community engagement really sits at the heart of the way we're approaching the project this time, and we are working really hard to make sure that we are working as transparently as possible all the way through, and we're providing a lot of opportunity for engagement in multiple forms so that the community can be involved to the extent that they want to. All right, I'm going to whip through some of these now. And so measures of success, the measures of success have been set, and this is really to the point of recognising in this reset what is important for the community, and so what success looks like. And that is about trust and transparency. It is then about that community engagement, and then obviously having basic project hygiene about being on time and on budget, and as a result, hopefully coming up with a plan that has that broad community support. We'll be reporting on the risks and the progress against these measures of success every quarter. And the first time we'll do that is at the Risk and Assurance Committee. I obviously drafted these slides before the committee name was changed and didn't notice that. So at the Risk and Assurance Committee each quarter starting next month. The scope of the project on the next slide gives you the town boundary as it's been determined from 2050 in Ahuake. But the point of this is to really remember that we are looking at Cambridge's place within the district and beyond. There are really important connections, obviously, through to the airport, through to Hamilton, through to Te Awamutu, through to the Waikato Expressway heading north and south. And so all of those connections remain really important, both for people and freight moving through Cambridge as well as people who are living in the town. The reason that we're doing this project, the kind of why now on the next slide, picks up on the point here around this population growth. For a number of people in Cambridge, the size of Cambridge the population will double over their lifetime. And so we are experiencing significant growth in Cambridge itself, and we'll see that when we have our growth briefing next week and on a bit of the bus tour when you start to see the district. So, transport is a means to an end, and it plays a really important part in that place shaping. And so the decisions that you make about particularly those sort of large network decisions about where might a bridge go, what are the connecting roads, how do people get around and through, what's the role of public transport, really shape the kind of town that Cambridge will grow into. And so that's why it's important. And I've covered off this point already about why now and around the funding cycle as well. We are not working in isolation. The next slide just gives you a diagram to remember that we already have Ahuake, our community spatial plan, that sets out what the community has expressed it wants for Cambridge. We have a growth strategy and a transport strategy, and so we're really putting the transport flesh on those bones and being really cognizant of what the community has already told us they want for Cambridge. The next slide gives you a bit of a timeline which takes you out to December next year and shows the upcoming decision in the shaded box down the bottom. Really, I'm not going to go through the slide, you will have read it. The key points around this slide are really that we are working at each phase to have this community engagement leading up to a council decision at each phase of the project. And so at the top, you can see what kind of engagement will occur through each of those times. And along the bottom, you can see what are the decision points for SP&P as the decision maker for this project. And it does mean that you get to lock in each of those phases, and then we build on that for the next phase of work. The next slide just builds on this a little bit more, that we are using a recognised decision-making framework called the Rapid Decision-Making Framework. Those of you who are readers will see that the table down the bottom then doesn't follow the way the acronym is set up, and the one down the bottom actually seeks to say, well, what's the sort of sequence of these things? But the purpose of making sure that we're really clear about this is particularly because we have got a number of groups who we're working with, making sure we're very clear about what role and responsibility does each group have? What role do we have as staff? What role does the community board have? What role does the community reference group have? And acknowledging SP&P as the decision maker through this process. And we are making sure that we implement that in the way that we go through this project. Similarly, around engagement with the next slide, the second framework that we are using again is the internationally recognised IAP2 framework. And again, this helps us be really clear about what our commitment is to the community and when are we informing, when are we consulting, and that's certainly something that we'll be informing throughout this project. When are we consulting? We are consulting particularly when we come up with a draft plan and we put that out for consultation towards the end. And when are we able to do more than that? When can we involve the community to come up with the problem statements and what do they think the problem themes are and what do they think the solutions are. And that's exactly what we've just been doing for this first phase of the project. And certainly I'm particularly excited about February, March next year, which is when we will be doing a large ideation stage with our community to actually gather all the possible ideas, good, bad and ugly, before we then start to filter that and to make that into a sensible transport program. The next slide now is not the updated one. Okay. What I will do separately, I think Ian had a question to Monty around, firstly, noting that there are many groups and many deliberately not lines rather than arrows on this diagram, and it reflects the sort of the nature of the input. And what I had done is update this to match that against the RAPID framework, which we had done in the background. But just to run through that, it does mean that we have input from staff, our wider community, the Ideas Forum, a community reference group, and the Cambridge Community Board. We have our strategic parameters and the project parameters set by our executive, which is the project control group, and a project governance group, which has a mixture of councillors and exec members on. And then we have SPMP as the decision maker. And so we're certainly clear within the project team about what roles each group is playing on the way through. Yeah. But I think the other point to make about this is just to note the role of each of these groups down the side. So as I said, we are really conscious of making sure there are opportunities for anyone in the community who wants to get involved to the extent that they do. And that means recognising that some people want to simply give us a quick thumbs up or down as they head on with their normal lives, and other people have a lot of themselves invested in the project and want opportunities to get heavily involved. So making sure there's a range of ways that we engage with the community, as well as methods of engagement, so that can be online, in person, etc., to cater for different needs of the community. We do have, just while we talk about engagement, we do have a parallel way that we're thinking about engaging with youth who are not particularly interested to turn up to something like a community reference group, which is hardly surprising. But we are working particularly with this through the school principals in Cambridge, and so you'll see that really come through strongly in the sort of next year when we think about the solutions. And the same with mana whenua. So Poto Davies is sitting on our community reference group, but also continue to work in parallel with Poto and with Norm Hill. So we have that parallel mana whenua stream, and we'll continue to be working with Poto and Norm to think about how we want to be engaging with mana whenua more broadly as well. We've referenced the community reference group of this group of 15 people. The group's met 3 times so far to be able to help develop these sort of problem themes that have really informed the statements that come to you, and it's been really, really crucial in being able to synthesise a lot of the community feedback, do that sense making, and then for support us as we turn that into the kind of technical NZTA speak that you see in the problem statements. The other group that we have is what we've called the Community Ideas Forum. As it says up there, that's currently 76 members, and these are people, again, who have a strong interest in the community around the project, and so we are using that Ideas Forum as that open space, as it says here, for people to be able to provide ideas, to be able to see what we are doing. So again, we've got that transparency around both the methodology and process, and people can provide suggestions and comments about that, as well as the content. And I think that that's hopefully a really useful way of enabling people to see and ask questions all the way through and maintain that openness. The next Look at that. You get a photo of the 15 and then you actually, and here they are, almost half of them in person. And so just to, this is the work that they've done so far, and the questions there that we've asked everybody, which I don't need to run through. The next slide probably therefore hasn't been updated either. What we did actually have this slide here sets out the key feedback themes that we received from public engagement that we had where we ran that for nearly a month. The numbers there are actually not the final numbers. So the final numbers are actually that we had 231 online submissions, 342 online votes, over 1,000 submission views, and 23 other submissions as well. So the number is actually even higher than what you see. And I think that that's a really good start when actually we were asking people what problems were. I expect there'll be a lot of people who will want to get stuck in when they say, well, what do you want us to do about it? And that number would be much greater.
Okay, Patty, is that pause point, is it not?
That's enough. Yeah, so absolutely. It's a whistle-stop tour about
at the end of the first phase. And look, take-home messages that this is a 30-year transportation project looking at the whole transportation system in Cambridge, and that engagement is at the heart of this project. Okay, so I'm going to cast open the floor to any questions, and these are going to be related to setup, project design as it's been explained, and progress to date. Okay, Claire.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. It's really exciting to see the great progress you've already made. It looks amazing. So I'm getting the message about the community engagement, and I'm interested about that younger voice, the youth. Now, you said you've got a plan to get that. I'd be like to know a bit more detail, because I do think it's critical, with a project that's going to spread, it's looking at a 30-year horizon. We've got to make sure that, we're getting those younger people who are actually going to be, living through all these changes, to make sure that, we're picking up their feedback, what they're wanting to see. So what's your plan in more detail to get their input?
Look, it's a really good question, and something that the last Training Council was really clear about as well. It is the young people and their families who are going to inherit the decisions that this council makes, and so that is really important. So for this phase of work, we certainly had a space for a youth member on the community reference group. We received 52 expressions of interest for that group, and none of them were from youth. So that's why there is not a member on the community reference group. But what we have done is, through this phase of work to try to get input, was to be putting out notices through school newsletters, as well as in libraries and other places where youth were, and we have met with the Cambridge and the Te Awamutu Principals Association to ask to work with each of them separately, because there's different interests obviously, to move into that phase next year when we move into solutions. So for Te Awamutu and the rest of the district, that will be, again, particularly they're very open to us including notices in their newsletters and things like that when we go out and call for feedback, so that all of the school students are really aware and their families are aware of that, and anything else where they want us to be able to sort of promote the project through that way. For the Cambridge principals, we have 2 of the principals who have been nominated by that group to work with us to develop a specific plan for next year, and we're just kicking that off now. And that will include all of next year, particularly for the high school. They have 2 sustainability prefects who have just been announced for next year, and they will be ongoing reps who we work with to both develop the plan for youth, because they'll have a much smarter idea about how we should do that than someone who's ancient like me, and that we'll be able to have that ongoing input from them. So when we have a specific plan, I'll be able to bring that to you, but at least we now have the right people to work with, along with our community advisors, to be able to develop that plan.
That sounds really encouraging. I'd really hope you'd be able to reach out to the university or Wintec or something as well, like that demographic. Yeah, because I do know that a lot of them do rely, well, they're still based in Cambridge. yeah, but have got different needs, but yeah, but I'm really encouraged, no, yeah, and wish, hope it's really successful. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Eye on your next, then Joe, then Delmarie.
I'll try and keep this neat and tidy. Firstly, a lovely piece of work, nicely put together. And thank you for looking at that rapid overlay on that org chart. I mean, look, that it is complicated and we should reflect it's complicated because it is. But I think, adding a little bit of context around that would be really helpful. I'd probably just two questions. One was around those measures of success. Have we put any quantitative measures against that yet?
The short answer is no, and that's because there weren't the measures in place for the previous phase of work, and so we're not able to compare apples with apples. We thought hard about trying to then have a sort of percentage improvement or increase, but it just wasn't meaningful because the way that we are approaching it with the level of community engagement, for example, is just so different to last time. And so what you'll see is quantitative stats, and we'll certainly then be able to think about trending over time, but qualitative explanation about that to be able to try to compare with a baseline, which we have done.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more going forward. So like, for example, the views on the engagement, right, it'd be really good to track those as we go, because as you said, I'm sure they'll pick up. And then the other sort of, there's probably, yep, that's it. There's only one other piece, which was, I had this conversation with Monty also about the engagement framework. And, when I looked at that slide, just it's page 12, I thought that was I was like, oh my gosh, we've just struck out collaborate and empower, which seems like a hell of a statement to make. But I understand that within the context of the NZTA process that we're following, that's because it's beholden upon the council to do that bit. My question was, in terms of the community reference group in particular, has that permeated and been understood? Because I think it's important to lay that groundwork. It hasn't been that, look, we're going to consult far and wide, but at the end of the day, there will be a decision, and that decision will have to sit with the council, legally so.
Yeah. That's certainly something that we have talked about. It's reflected in the terms of reference for the community reference group, and we've certainly been talking about it with the community board as well. But I'll leave the community reference group to sort of comment on on that and the way that their role's sort of playing out towards the end. Yeah.
Look, you raised that with me. I'd already raised it with Katie, and we'd discussed this. And how that worked for me is utmost transparency, right? Yeah. The IAP framework is a framework, and Katie, I'll just get you to speak about that in a second. But the fact that the last two sort of categories of that are not applicable didn't mean we should hide them. It meant we should straight up front say they're there, but we can't do them. So Katie, can you just
that precise same curve?
Yeah, Katie, could you just tell us in 1 minute what IAP2 is?
It is the International Association of, is Lisa in the room? What are the two P's? Public participation, International Association of Public Participation. And it is the international sort of best practice here. Lisa and some of her staff are trained in this to apply this methodology. And it's certainly something that I've used in previous projects as well, and as has Lisa and her staff, and I've found it a really useful way of both as making sure that you, like I say, I said before, I used the sort of promise to the community. Is really easy for us to be a bit sloppy in our language and say that we're going to engage with someone or we're going to consult with someone. What do we actually mean, and what are we actually able to do, and what are we offering to do? And I think that this keeps, from a project perspective, keeps us with that rigour, and it means that the community knows what they can expect and hold us to account for that.
Thanks, Katie. Right, to Joe next.
Thank you. Thanks, Katie, for your report and for all the work done so far. And again, welcome to all the members from the Community Reference Group. Thank you also for your time that you're putting into this project. It is so important. So thank you very much. My question is around the Ideas Forum. I really hoped that there would have been more than just 73, and you said there was an increase in number, because there were definitely more than 73 people last year that we were dealing through community board meetings and public meetings. And I hope when the time is right that, and I acknowledge that sometimes you need to go to people rather than them coming to you. So I'm looking forward to February and March next year, where hopefully that will happen. Periodically, I had a look at some of the themes running through that open forum, and you've captured some of the larger ones there. But I'd really love to be provided with a breakdown of all of them somehow, if possible, perhaps in a future workshop, just so they're in front of us to just really have a look at some of those other smaller details coming through.
Absolutely, and that would it was intended that would be an appendix to the SPNP report that comes to all of you, so that actually then that's reported back to the community at large through that forum. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Dale Marie.
Kia ora Katie, ai en tautoko nā kōrero o te koromatua tuarua. My kōrero is I'm going to offer to you, because I've been out there socialising with rangatahi Māori, particularly in regards to the Māori ward not being here after 28, was kind of a bit more of my focus in looking at how we gear that up. So I've been out there socialising with a different marae. I actually haven't got to my auntie's marae yet, and they're next on the list, Pohara and Maunga Tautiri. And I bring them up especially because of high-functioning rangatahi that we have out there. People like Tāne Aruka, who was one of our tuia recipients here, or our last tuia recipient for Waipa District Council. And I think this week he's in Brazil, Auntie, at COP30. So I've been looking at, I want to say, quite high-functioning rangatahi in very high-functioning places at the moment that are some of Waipa's finest. And I would like to stay in touch in regards to that rangatahi space, because if they come out with like a iwi consultative group, I think they'll be a great group for us to engage with at council. So tēnā tātou.
Kia ora, Dale Marie. I'd love to take you up on that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, Pip, you next.
I'm very conscious that one of the contributors to traffic problems is the fact that the Department of Education decided not to build a new school on the Leamington side. That, I presume, is going to continue, but at the same time, it's a matter of priorities with the central government to sort of create a new high school. How do you cope with sort of what is effectively a sort of, it may come pressure to build that, you know, and so therefore some of the traffic problems, given the fact that we're talking about 2040, you know, plus to build this, if, you know, in 8 years' time, all of a sudden the new school is built on that side, it changes the dynamics.
Hey, Pip, can we hold that for the problem statement part of this, unless you've got something specifically you'd like to say, Katie? Because I think that leads, that is, you know, part of the problem statement. And I just want to go through this in a nice order in this workshop. So can you hold that thought and we'll come back to it? Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my comment or question may well have been similar to Pip's, and I think you've done a tremendous job, and I think the definition of the problem is good. But as we know from the previous iteration, we were very dependent upon government policy and policy directives, and we know that there's going to be quite considerable policy direction within this next year as RMA changes come out and all of the other future of local government. There's going to be a heck of a change there. How are we going to adapt to those changes if there is a need in a revision of any of our policy statements? Are we perhaps a little bit, I'm hoping that we're not casting ourselves in concrete in that.
Can I answer that when we come to the problem statements again? It's a very good question.
And it could almost be summarised as, is the government missing from this whole engagement framework, is essentially what Pip and Roger are getting at. So yeah, go for it.
No, I'll come to it when we speak about the problem statements, because I think that there'll be some related questions that crop up if you're comfortable with that.
Okay, Dean.
I want to go back to the engagement framework part, and I don't know if this is going to come up as a problem or not. I had the same concerns that obviously a few people have had around that model, and then collaboration and empower aren't available, and we can see why. But if we don't communicate that clearly enough to everybody and consistently, are we going to end up in another situation? This is just how I see it looking in. You know, we had, you know, what we did in Kihikihi, and part of our argument was we've got money, and so we made decisions. That's how I see it. But then the public still didn't like it. Are we in danger of having that, where we go so far with the engagement and then we take over and then we still do something they don't want and no one's happy? Is that a question?
Yeah, I mean, there is a question in there, isn't there? Look, this flows right through. This is a component part of everything we're going to be doing in SPMP over the next couple of years. And the timing of this is linked to our next long-term plan cycle. That's why this is scheduled to finish in December, so that we can get any of the next steps embedded in our next 10-year plan. So your questions, I mean, that partly answers it, right? That's how it's going to go. And the first part of your question is essentially, are we setting public expectations that we can't deliver on consultation? Is that what you're getting at? Okay, and I mean, that is why that IAP piece is in there, and it's why we're doing this publicly. And it's why I'm so pleased so many people are in the room, that we've just got to keep getting this story out, that this is how we're proceeding. Is that good enough for you, Dean?
Yes and no, because, you know, I worked in media all those years, and what I still found out is you can do what you like, and heaps of people don't care until they care. So how do we make them all know what's going on, so that they know they can only go so far, and then there's going to be decisions, and then they decide that it's wrong because they haven't paid attention. How do we fix that?
Okay, Katie, that's
a whole nother question.
That one's over to you in the communication space in this project. Can you talk to that, please?
Yeah, so I think that what I said at the outset is that we need to make sure that we are informing the community all the way through about what's going on. It's certainly true that people tune into something when it becomes really relevant to them, and so, but we are conscious of that across the district, and so using multiple channels to make sure that people are aware that the project's going on, where we're at with the project, when their opportunity is to get involved in more detail if they want to. And then, as we say towards the end, when we have a draft plan, you will approve the draft plan going out for consultation. It will go out for a consultation process under the Local Government Act, and then you will finalise the plan. Even after that, as Monty says, you've got a plan, but you've still got to then translate that into which bits you're going to fund when. So then the community gets another opportunity once you've prioritised through your draft long-term plan and go out for consultation again for that funding to actually be progressed. So that's when the rubber starts to really hit the road at that time.
And I'll just offer one more comment there. This phase of the setup and the problem statement, let's be honest, it's not super exciting. But once you get down to long list and short list, that is really going to drive engagement, right? Once you start going through the ideation phase, coming up with the ideas, going from long list to short list, I suspect there'll be a lot more people engaged there. I might make this the last question, Claire, because I want to wrap this phase and move on to the next step.
Well, I was just picking up on what Dean said. Okay, I have a lot of respect for Dean's experience, in like the media and stuff like that. I wasn't going to challenge the engagements framework because I accepted, that Katie had done, fitted it the best. But given on what Dean said, I would look at that second line, okay, under collaborate. What you've crossed out is we will look to you for advice and innovation in formulating solutions and incorporate your advice and recommendations into decisions to the maximum extent possible. I actually think it would be possible to make that available to this framework, not to cross it out, because exactly what Monty has just said, actually, I believe that is the intent. And I don't think it contravenes the prescriptions that we have to comply with for the NZTA process. It'd be great to pick up what people said about this is one part of the process. We're going to move into another stage where, we'll actually probably take a more open view on input, and I think it's important to convey that. Yeah. So I'm just putting that on the table, Monty.
Yeah, if I can just respond before we go on. And look, I really hear you, and we've actually gone back and forth about this, about what's intended. So I think the only point I would make is that when we are looking across 30 years, we need to make sure that we are bringing in and we are informing our community so they can provide us with some informed feedback as well. It's certainly true that some of the feedback that we received, even around the problems, relate very much to the here and now, and that's what you would expect. And so we need to do a good job within the project team to actually, when we're thinking about what will change and making sure the community is aware of how much Cambridge will change, how much technology will change, how much everything else will change over 30 years, and make sure that we're weaving in some of that technical knowledge alongside the community knowledge. And they're not two separate things, obviously, but make sure that we are able to weave that in well, so we don't just end up fixing today's problem without really recognising what the long-term aspirations might be.
Okay, thanks. Right, I want to move us on to the next part of this, which is a bit more of a focused debate on the steps towards a bridge being built in Cambridge, okay? We were keen for this to be done as a bit of a separate topic because we don't think it's well understood, the steps involved, and to lay on the table now a indicative plan or a sequence of steps with indicative timing is very, very useful. Obviously, this is the biggest ticket item part of the project, potentially the most controversial. So again, right at the outset, we wanted to socialise what that looks like at this stage.
Maybe only Brian's there too.
Okay,
All right,
back to you, Katie.
Perhaps I'll just kick off and then I'll hand over. So the first slide that you have with the indicative steps is one that we've been using already with the community. And there's a few things to sort of point out about that slide. Do you mind, Zoe, moving on a couple of, one more? Thank you very much. So what this shows is that there are obviously a number of decision points for you as council as we move from December next year, which is the first step where you would confirm your transport plan, to then being able to have funding available to move in your long-term plan as your second decision point, to then move through to actually get to a bridge. From my point of view and the discussion that we've already had earlier in the week, is that there's a real desire to get to a point where you can get to designation of the bridge as quickly as possible, because that's how you can give certainty to the community about what's happening. To get there, there are a number of steps that you need to go through, and money is only part of the solution. So it will be really important that we are able to put forward what funding would be required to move through as quickly as possible through into that 27 long-term plan. And that will then get prioritised with everything else. But I think the value of having Alasdair and Brian here today is that they can use Peacocke's and any other sort of bridge as a bit of an example, which I understand took 19 years from serious study to having a bridge completed. It will happen, but it won't happen overnight, which is, to paraphrase Rachel Hunter. And so, I think that's one of the things that we need to keep communicating to the public, because that won't happen overnight. And all, I say in inverted commas, we will have in the transport plan by the end of next year is a corridor, a general area where a bridge will go. We can colour it a different colour, but as I've said before, it will still be a blob. And that is unavoidable in the way that infrastructure projects happen in New Zealand. And again, that's something I think it's really important that we keep being really clear about with the community, so they don't expect that by the end of next year they know exactly where that bridge is going to go and if their property is or is not impacted, because we cannot give them that certainty by the end of next year. So I think those are perhaps the sort of key messages for us to make sure that we really understand and that we're able to communicate with our community. And on that, I'll hand over to Alasdair to introduce himself a little bit more and then just take us through the next few slides. But really, we'll try to do that quickly so that you get to ask questions of people who actually know what they're talking about, being Alasdair and Brian. Thanks, Alasdair.
Thank you. So I'm Alasdair Gray. I'm a civil engineer rather than a relationship specialist. So I had the privilege of being selected to manage the Peacocke programme. My involvement with the Peacocke programme started with the funding application for Southern Links in around about 2007, when I was quite a lot younger than I am now. And the Southern Links was effectively, it was a 32-kilometre network designation joint between NZTA and Hamilton City. It crossed, I think, seven hapu, had the single river with a collection of bridges across it. Two regional plans, 4 district plans at the time, 3 funding frameworks, and I think it was simpler than your Cambridge study is likely to be. The word complex was used a couple of times in your previous conversation, and I think you just need to acknowledge that it will be complex. You will not make everybody happy. And right at the end, there will still be people who deny that you spoke to them at all at the beginning. So I promised Brian that I would be slightly positive today, but it's that do not underestimate what you are walking into. I think you had a taste of it last year with just having an experimental blue blob. It will get sorer and sorer as you get shortlist and into the final details. From the community perspective, the duration of the investigation and the consultation and the uncertainty is, I think, a really important thing to bear in mind. We decided to go as fast as we could for Southern Links, and it was still 2 years of investigation and then 2 years of process. For the land acquisition, even with the designation having been in place for 10 years, there were still people objecting and denying that they had been spoken to at all. So I think the understanding there's a community consultation perspective, and then there's a statutory consultation perspective, and the authority, the council is a requiring authority in terms of the designation. The reason it's a requiring authority, not an asking authority, is for linear infrastructure. You will not have everybody happy on all of the routes that you want. So you need to be brave, I think, and right. So I'll start with that one. Yeah. So Southern Links, I think the previous slide showed the timeline. I think, it's around about right, that 15 years-ish to get to something completed, and that's without pausing. So I think, allowing yourself sufficient time to do it properly, you've started in the right place. So the Southern Links 2 gauges, and it's only a third built, I think, so far. There's still the rest of the network to construct. The impact of the process on the community is huge. And then the impact of the designation on the people that are under the designation, the uncertainty that they face is also huge. So when you start, you really need to know that you are going to finish, or it's just going to end up upsetting people. So all of the decisions that you make need to be so solid that effectively, and it cannot become an election issue the next time. The time frame will be crossing national and local elections 3 or 4 times. So every time you make a decision, it needs to be election proof. Basically, the wheels need to be chalked solidly, and that means that the amount that you're spending on the investigation needs to be fairly substantial. So in order to make a robust and correct decision, you need to have the information that's available, to do it properly. That creeps into the cost bit. We prepared a very large collection of pages. I think it ended up being 6,500 pages of investigation, $9 million at the time. So now you're probably looking at a $15 to $20 million price tag, and that will get you a book that supports a decision. And if the decision goes your way, then that means that you become financially responsible for the land under the designation, which is Peacocke was greenfield, so still quite expensive. You've got Cambridge, which is extremely expensive. So anybody that is financially disadvantaged, hardship, they're emotionally distraught, if they decide and go to the Environment Court to request that you buy the property, you will be buying that property, and you need to make sure that you're budgeting for that. And that is one of the reasons why going from a blue blob to the outlines very quickly is important. That also feeds into the level of investigation. It's in Peacocke, we were doing we'll go for a 100-meter corridor. We'll squeeze it down to 70 where we have to. It ended up still not being wide enough for some of our construction, and we were going through paddocks. So we're selecting boundaries with who to affect, who not to affect. You've got boundaries every 20 meters as you go along streets. So which neighbour gets affected by which bit will be a question that you're asked at every stage of the process, whether it's a blob or the designation boundary. That sort of decision-making is complicated and needs quite a lot of thought and a proper understanding of where you're ultimately going to get to. I was talking to Rachel earlier, and this process feels like it's being designed correctly going forward. Having been through the tail end of it, if I was designing my Peacocke's process, I would start with, and we got our last High Court appeal resolved yesterday. I would start there and work backwards as well to check the statutory process and the community process match, and the decision points are all sort of complementary. Having said that, the Tangata Whenua and the community consultation in Peacocke, after we got to the tail end of it, was awesome. So the relationships that you build, having gone through quite a lot of pain once you get to the tail end of it, are very solid relationships if you've done it properly. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of for Peacocke, is the Tangata Whenua working group being effectively part of the team. You couldn't tell, the engineers, ecologists, cultural. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I'm very proud. The illustrations there. This is the equivalent of your scope and long list to short list. So for having had a bash at some previous designations, for the Southern Link stuff, we went broad. So we wrote to 7,300 people to tell them that we might be putting a road through their kitchen. That got us off quite a lot of Christmas card lists for quite a long time. And then we narrowed that down. So the acre is the area. So you work out where your dots are supposed to join up. Your area needs to be big enough around that. If you do not have that area big enough, then your decision making is potentially flawed and your consultation is potentially compromised. Once you get through that, the acre acronym, the area, then you go into the corridors. How do you join your dots together and what are the possibilities? You have that and you go through everything in my mind, because for a bridge selection type question, you'll get the why is it there? Why is it not 100 meters further up? Why is it not a kilometer further up? And you need to show that you've, at least at some level, tested all of those options. I'm not very good at this. Yes. So this is the Southern Links process. So we went through the areas, then we identified the corridors, and the corridors fed into a collection of potential networks. And that, I think, is something that for the Cambridge process, you need to understand. You know, so Cambridge is it's a grid pattern. You know, so your networks are any of the roads. All of the roads look the same. They've all developed the same. It's the same river that you're crossing. Why are you using my road? Why are you not using the next one along? Over a 40 to 60-year planning horizon, the land use can change and evolve to whatever road pattern you impose on it. So you need to choose the right one and understand and have the option evaluation, the long list to short list, again, very robust and filtered so that you're chalking the wheels at the right places. And then eventually, having upset 7,300 people, we ended up with maybe 150 landowners who knew that they were going to be affected. Some of them that asked for their properties to be bought effectively immediately because they wanted out. Some of them moved in and then found that they had just been designated, which resulted in a real estate agent's embarrassment at one time when somebody found out at their welcoming barbecue that their house had a road going through it in the future. So that, flicking on from that, making sure that you've got records of all of your engagement and consultation right the way through is very important for this sort of duration. We said this, you said that, so that clarity of messaging, so don't sugarcoat anything. Don't intentionally upset people, but I think the being direct and honest about what the potential impacts will be are important. And then we got our designation. The designation was for 20 years. Currently the RMA doesn't like long duration designations. You've got to fight very hard for that. I'm not sure what the likely changes to the RMA are going to do, but the rationale for needing a very long designation, I think, will be important. And if you are protecting something, you're compromising somebody's enjoyment of their property, that financial responsibility, and being funded for that financial responsibility and willing to spend the money to respond to that financial responsibility, I think is a political commitment that you need to effectively embrace. So with the designation, I think it was 2014, it ended up in the district plan. So a 5-year process to get it. People then forgot because there wasn't the money for Southern Links within the 10 years, within Hamilton's 10-year plan. And then the Housing Infrastructure Fund opportunity came up. So all of a sudden, from 2017, Southern Links and the Peacocke's work being miles away, it became a now. So the business case, just the business case itself was, so the hundreds of thousands of dollars just as the funding application. That got us a $290 million loan, 10-year interest-free loan from the government. That is only part of the money. There's a local share as well. The local roads to upgrade, little pipes that weren't strategic, the stuff that has to be done at the same time to be efficient, along with the rest of the network. So when you do think about the bridge, it's not just the bridge cost. You will have the roads leading up to the bridge, the property, so all of the other costs associated with it. The pipes to put in that wouldn't have needed to be replaced if they weren't. So the costing will be important. The bridge itself in Peacocke was around about 55 million of a $166 million contract. The contract included roads, roundabouts, and pipes and other stuff. So the bridge was a significant component and the most exciting bit. I'm slightly biased. I used to be a structural engineer, and the most sort of obvious portion of the infrastructure. The bridge is a massive success from my perspective because of the nature of the design, cultural symbolism that's been put into it, the future-proofing thought that's been put into it. So the deck is flexible, so we can lift up the footpaths, make them wider, make them narrower. It's capable of accommodating light rail in future if necessary. So the functional performance of the bridge has been thought about. And one of the reasons that I think the bridge is successful was the process, the design process that went into it. So BBO were the consultants. So there were architects, bridge architects, and BBO, and they got interest groups or representative groups from different potential users, people that would see the bridge, people who would cycle the bridge, people that would walk underneath the bridge, river users, trucks, buses. So the local community and the wider community. And we demanded a functional specification for the bridge, not what kind of a bridge do you want, is what do you want the bridge to do? And what do you want the bridge to do can include the appearance, so we want it to represent Hamilton. So the word iconic was used as kind of, that's interpretable everywhere, but that functional specification was developed. That was approved by the council, and the council approved the design process. We were lucky, I think, so with much respect to elected members, the last thing that I would have wanted in the bridge process was elected members deciding what the bridge should be. So it's effectively a technical decision. The elected members approved at each stage, said, what's the bridge purpose? How will it function? What will it broadly look like? So there were macroscope approvals as we went through the process, but the design was effectively a technical team design rather than a political process. We would have ended up with a weird looking camel, I think, at the end. Yeah. And I think that was it. The time for the property, even when you press go, we pressed go on the 1st of July in 2018. And that High Court resolution was yesterday. We have spent a fortune on lawyers. We have spent an awful lot on engagement, and we have had arrests, trespasses, protesters, sabotage, and police on standby. And we thought we were doing our consultation correctly and well. But it has been an awesome experience, and it is a really cool bridge.
Good luck. Alasdair, thank you. And Katie, I knew this bit was going to be good. That was really good. I love having a capable, realistic Scotsman engineer in the room. Now I've got two. So, yeah, look, that was great. And I think we all needed to hear that. So, opening up for questions. Did someone help me? I had Dalma right at the beginning, actually. Can you help me on questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you and nice to meet you, Alasdair. I actually don't have a question. I just have a compliment because I understand the COAS award that came out that my cousins flew over and picked up in New York. And I look forward to the day where we start getting awards for the Cambridge New Bridge. Tēnā tātou.
Okay, I've got an order here. Claire, we're going to you. I got you guys down there,
Thanks.
okay?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I can be that positive. I took on board a lot of the comments you made, actually, Alice, and I really appreciate you, putting us in the picture in that respect. So I've got questions about the timeline, which is the sort of the first slide in this pack, and then another one. So with the council decision point in the middle there, it's the designation of resource consents, and 2 to 3 years has been allowed for that. And I just wondered whether, yeah, it's that middle one there in teal. And I just wondered whether or not you could give us a comment if it could be like part of the fast tracked suite of policies, whether or not that could be reduced, or is that a really realistic timeframe, for the designation and resource consent stages?
I think it's realistic. If you're chasing a fast track kind of approach, you need to know exactly where your bridge is going. In order to get exactly where your bridge is going, you've got to drill holes, get the design, and and be really confident that it's there. So it is realistic.
Yeah, okay, cool, thanks. And then I think it's the next slide, the Southern Links designation, and you've got some costs there. Yes, that second bullet point is 0.6 million a year for environmental and community. What did that entail? Yeah, why was that cost required? And is it, I suppose, what's your estimate for our project for Cambridge? Would it be similar or more or less?
So the environmental and community are effectively separate components. The community component, there's the Town of Whenua working group that was a requirement of the conditions. And there's another condition that requires a community liaison group. And that was to balance the duration of the designation that we got. So if people were going to be uncertain for 10, 15 years, they needed an avenue to be able to talk to the project through. So that maintained that. The environmental was because of lizards and bats. The Peacocke, which when it's for something that's dark, squeaks at a level that you can't hear and only flies at night. They're very hard to find, but we apparently have lots and lots of these rare things to avoid. So there's an entire environmental monitoring and mitigation plan associated with that. But Southern Links is it's a much bigger corridor than you're going to be imposing an environmental change on. Effectively, you're going to have a river crossing. So I don't think it would be the same. But from the community perspective, if you've got a 10-year process, you'll still need to set aside money for managing the community relationship for that period.
Thanks. Look, we put those costs in there just purely indicative, just to give some sort of idea of the quantum that we need to be thinking about, because I suspect some of those things hadn't been being thought about in elected members' minds. Okay, Roger?
Yes, thank you. I think it's really good. Whoops. Yeah, I see. I'm out of practice. Thank you for this timeline, and I'm really pleased that this workshop is actually being held in public, because it's certainly going to clarify, I think, some of the things that are out there, and I appreciate your comment that we are going to finish up with some kind of blob, and I hate the use of that word because it kind of links us back to the previous situation. But I think we do need to clarify to change the perception of what the public has out there, that in fact this process in December is going to pinpoint a position of a bridge, because we know that it's not, and we're publicly saying now that it's not. But I think we maybe have to dispel some of their fears of how wide that corridor is going to be, because you mentioned that you've got to look at, you know, do you need this width or are you going to need this width? And you could well make the wrong decision. So how wide is that corridor going to be? So that's something I think that we've got to get out there and establish a true understanding with the community. Now, I'm assuming that currently there are a number of options for where that corridor is going to go. Is that going to be public information?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. And I think that in itself is going to give us a challenge because there'll be a number of groups that'll have their concern that it might be affecting them. But it also gives me a question, if there are going to be those options, and with the growth in Cambridge and the fact that the developers are actually now currently developing and houses are popping up all over this place, how are we going to protect the opportunity for that corridor placement if that growth is happening? How are we going to prevent the opportunities being overtaken by development?
So, yeah. So then the protection, corridor protection can come at a range of levels. You could protect it through the district plan by showing where the future connection would be. But all that's going to do is deter people. It's not full protection. The only real protection is the designation.
Which is in 3 years' time.
Can we just be clear on this? I think that the definition of designation is really important, that is the legal protection that this is aiming to achieve. So I don't know which is best of you just to give us a quick understanding of what designation actually means.
So council, as a requiring authority, is able to put in a notice of requirement under the Resource Management Act. And that requirement is for land. And then the purpose of the land can be for, you know, public works. So that, yeah, so for Southern Links, it was for transport. So that notice of requirement goes in and sets effectively a boundary that stops a landowner from doing anything on the land that will, I can't remember the exact words, but compromise the ability of the requiring authority to meet its objectives. In order to get the designation, so the designation is effectively a dotted line that ends up going into the district plan, that if you're under the designation and you want to do anything other than, you know, so the little, you know, so put a shed up that can be moved or whatever, if it's going to compromise the ability of the requiring authority to meet its objectives, you need the permission of the requiring authority. So effectively you take the land that is underneath the designation and put a pause on it, which is a cost to the landowner, hence the financial responsibility for that land. The designation makes it easier to require the land. So you can take the land through the Public Works Act property processes. It came as a bit of a surprise to me that it doesn't make it automatic. You still need to demonstrate that you need the land, that land, and why it is that land and how big it is. So that the designation supports the taking of the land, but it doesn't guarantee it. So the designation is a protection tool under the Resource Management Act.
And just one clarification from your question, Roger, you were saying there will be options. When you're, and here's my question to you, identifying a bridge corridor at this stage is how that works in a sort of transport system piece of work. It's not an engineering question at this stage, or not a physical, civil construction engineering question.
Yeah, so engineering is an input. Ecology is an input. The existing transport structures and networks are inputs. It may be cheaper to buy a block of houses and demolish all of them than build a bridge in the wrong place. So there's a wide collection of inputs to that. The thing to remember is that it's not the existing transport context that you're thinking about. So it's at least 14 years, but something like a bridge is going to change the next 100 years. So once you put the bridge in, that will change traffic patterns and movement all the way around. I think that if I were managing the process, I wouldn't have options at the start of the process. I would have the length of the river that we are considering crossing as the start point, and then get into practicality from there. But it's engineering's a bit, cost a bit.
Can I just add one thing to that? Just to bring it back to the decision-making role of council. And so this is exactly where in the timeline that we had on the earlier slide, when we have the long list of ideas, that long list will be brought to you. And at that point, the other thing that will be coming to you is seeking guidance about what are the guardrails. I'm trying to use a deliberately generic term. What are the guardrails? What's the direction that you give to us about what's the criteria and the principles that we should actually use as we start to funnel that? And if there are things that are particularly important to you, then that is the direction that you will give us. And so those are the considerations that we will or won't take into account, and the sort of weight that we put on each of those. And that's the political decision that you make that guide how we then go from that long list to short list, to use that sort of language. Yeah.
Thanks, Katie. Right, Joe, you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Alasdair, for that presentation. That was really insightful and answered a lot of questions for me. Could I make a request that maybe Alasdair comes back and sees us in perhaps 6 months and sees how we're progressing along? I will acknowledge, just for that timeline, that there will be many people in Cambridge who are battling with ever increasing congestion, who look at that timeline and feel pretty depressed, and your presentation has really helped answer some of those questions. In your experience, I mean, obviously these are just indicative, and hopefully we keep very much on time here, and it could even be shortened. But in your experience, which of these stages has the highest risk of delay?
I think the biggest risk of the area where you would be able to save most time is at the beginning.
Okay.
In the so consultation, engagement, and going through. That's where the biggest risk comes, because the worst thing that you could possibly do is have shallow consultation, shallow investigation, then find yourself at a future decision point going back 2 or 3 years. So I think I would invest in the time at the beginning to do things properly. Then once you've made your decision about where it is and you're starting the statutory processes, then I think once you've got that sorted, you press the button and you go as hard and fast as you possibly can. And if you're confident that you are going to be building a bridge in that place, do the investigations so you can get to the specific boundaries that you're going to be directly affecting. So I think I would spend your time getting it right. Mm-hmm. Then once you've got it right, go as hard and fast as you can.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Hey, I've got Pip, Ion, and Shane. I want to call it after that because we've got to move on to problem statements, and I want to leave a decent amount of time to discuss that. Okay, so those three in that order: Pip, Ion, Shane.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just want you to maybe make further comment or with regard to the difference between greenfields as you had in the Peacocke Road versus so basically the number of people you have to consult with if you're going through the centre of a town as opposed to greenfields. How would you sort of determine the degree of complexity as you move from greenfields to effectively a large number of individual property owners?
I think they're all individuals. So the remembering that, I think, is important. One of the aspects of Peacocke that I hadn't really thought about at the beginning was if you remove one house, then you're not just affecting that house, you're taking somebody's neighbour away, or a school friend, or a portion of a community. So I think the social connections from people being much, much closer to each other is something that I would think about very hard in an urban area. And then the other bit is being particularly sensitive to how small the blocks are. You know, so the difference between a 100-metre corridor, a 70-metre corridor, and a 50-metre corridor, it will come down to which side of whose fence you're on, and that is where, once you've got your short list and you're committed to it, then I think that's where going very hard into the investigation so that you can choose which boundary is where I would make the investment. The other element which I didn't mention was the allowance for construction space and the potential for construction impacts. We need to protect that at designation time, have a big designation where you have one for construction that can be drawn back in afterwards. But if you don't protect the construction space, then you could double or treble the cost of your construction.
I'll be as quick as I can. Alasdair, nice to meet you, and thank you for your presentation. I thought that was excellent. I'll make 3 points, 2 of which I think are for you, Katie, and 1 of which is for the people around this table. So in terms of, so I recognise a lot of what you said, having just seen a job I was first involved in London in 2008, complete this year, which involved putting a coffer dam in the River Thames to do investigations in front of the Houses of Parliament. So I feel your pain. One of the big success stories there was that their public engagement turned it completely around into a positive thing. And so I wonder if we can challenge ourselves there, where we get away from the conversation around, oh, it's a bridge, to what you made at the beginning, the point there, Alasdair, which is we're not building a bridge for the sake of building a bridge. We are improving our transport system in order to do this. And so if we can, that's not spin, that's the reality. Yes, we're going to build a bridge, but it's because we want to do this stuff, not because we want to build a bridge. And then secondly, you also alluded to this, or more directly, Alasdair, a lot of the timeframes on here are a legal framework that's driving that timeframe. And so I think taking that post-mortem look of, okay, what are places where we're going to get, like, we already know what the points we're going to get stuck on are in this process. So is there anything we can do to prepare information ahead of time, not to presume an outcome, but, we know the questions are going to come. So how can we produce that information ahead of time in order to, have as neat and tight an answer so we can go hard and fast once the decision is made? And then last but not least, I think to your question, Dean, it comes back to the people around this table to have the courage of their convictions. We are going to make decisions all the way along here. And when election time comes around and we've made an unpopular decision, we have to own that decision and not back away from it, because I have been on the other side of that. And I can tell you that makes or breaks the successful delivery of programs, because if you've got flip-flopping from a governing body, you end up back at the start again. And that is, this will go round in circles forever if we don't have the courage of our convictions.
Okay, last Shane.
So one of the frustrations is how long things take, the time, and that's where I get the feedback from people. And they say, this is not a new project. We haven't just started a project. It's a reset of a project that should have already, had already started. So is there a way to show the work that's been done previous to the reset, to say that we're actually 4, 5, 6 years into it or whatever, not that this is the start now, and because people are really, really frustrated by a long time schedule on something was just merely a reset? So that's one comment. The second thing is the original blob, was that in the wrong place? Because if it wasn't in the wrong place, then that is the right place. And the third point I want to make is one on risk. What is our relationship with NZTA? Are they going to be holding hands with us right through this process and give us money at the end of it? Or do we have the risk that we spend this money and then suddenly they're out? So sorry, there's 3 questions.
Hopefully I'll remember each of them. If I can start with the third one first. So we have been working alongside NZTA. NZTA works with local government as they develop business cases. They have a team of people who do that. And so we have an ongoing working relationship with NZTA staff. They have already approved what they call a point of entry, which is the very first step to acknowledge that there is merit in doing a piece of work. And the work that we are doing at the moment follows the NZTA process, and they have approved that we are following their process. When we come out of this at the end when we come out of this stage of work with a draft strategic case, that also goes to NZTA. And so we have that interaction all the way so that we are confident. NZTA have been absolutely upfront with us, just as they are with everybody else, that they are not guaranteeing that there is funding at the end of this, because they cannot possibly guarantee that, because as has already been said, the priorities are then set each 3 years by the government of the day. But what we can guarantee is that we are set up to be able to apply for funding, and perhaps that sort of morphs onto the questions that you asked before about the way that we're going about it. So if you'll let me go sideways to that and then perhaps come back to your other 2 questions. So we're really conscious as we develop this plan that we are developing these short, medium and long-term initiatives. 30 years, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is obviously 10 political cycles, both of this council and of central government. And we're really conscious of that as we go about developing the plan. And what it does mean is that we need to be able to provide the rationale for this, not just relying on the current government priorities, because they will continue to change. And so that's one of the things about how we hook back to the way that we describe the problems and therefore the solutions that we come up with. And in the plan at the end, what will always happen is that over a 30-year period, it will always be the government's prerogative to choose what those priorities are every 3 years and where they put their funding. But if you've got a plan, it enables you to go as hard and as fast as you can on the elements of the plan that the government wants to be co-funding at the time. And so at least you can keep checking in and make progress over the long haul. And so that's something we're very conscious of, about the way we write the problem statements and the way we write the plan at the end. And I think NZTA in that way, just like this council, is increasingly recognising that there is a distinction between making a decision about whether something is a good investment and whether they then can fund it. It's perfectly legitimate to say this is an excellent investment case. Currently, we have $0 to be able to progress it. And when we have some, then we'll be able to move that forward. But you don't squash it and say, no, we're not going to approve something because we didn't have any dollars. And that's what we will be working to, so that the transport plan is acknowledged by NZTA as a good plan. And then we go through a separate funding step. All right, your first 2 questions, which of course I've forgotten because I've lathered on.
Was the blob in the right place, and could the
work
preceding the preset
be
considered part of this?
So we are not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There was plenty of really good ideas from the community. There was plenty of technical work done in the first round that we would be foolish to chuck away as well. Having said that, we are starting at the beginning of the process, and that comes back into exactly what we're kind of leading into next, is about the problem statements. Obviously, the way you define the problem has a really big bearing on what the solution might look like. So if I exaggerate for effect, if you say that the problem is that everyone wants to work and live in Cambridge and therefore come into Cambridge to do what they need to do, that might lead you to think that you need more bridge capacity very close to town because that's where everyone's going. If you say the problem is too many people are coming through town, and actually that's destroying the amenity of the town centre and et cetera, then that might lead you to a decision that the bridge should be further out. So the way you define your problem is really, really critical. And it's why NZTA requires you to sort of hold yourselves in this space at first and be clear about that problem statement before you start jumping to solutions, which is what we like doing as humans. So it's not safe to assume that that the problem statements that were determined last time are necessarily the ones that that this council will confirm this time. And the reason for that, I think, is because of perhaps a couple of things that have changed even in the context since the work was done the first time. And the first is actually this recognition from NZTA about the 30-year nature of this kind of work and the fact that you don't have to pin yourself to the 3-year priorities of the day, which was a real focus around business case development in the whole sector, and because everyone's chasing money from NZTA. So you end up writing, it's word bingo, right? And so you kind of see what's in the government policy statement and you go, oh yeah, I need 2 of those and 1 of those, and I'll make sure that's in my problem statement. It's just not a legitimate way to be approaching something that's going to last for 30 years. And so that shift in NZTA enables us to take that more neutral language about it and be clear about those problems. And the second thing is, even since that work was done, the world continues to evolve. So Southern Link's now being identified as a road of national significance. The Cambridge to Pieredi extension, for example, I mean, those are just 2 examples of decisions that have been made recently that change the way that we would want to see ourselves kind of moving around and mean that we need to kind of retest what those problem statements are. So we are starting from step 1. And if we sat in a dark room, we could probably pop something out pretty quickly. If we want to work with our community and hear from them and actually reflect their thinking in the work that we're doing, then absolutely the time frame we've got is the least amount of time we can take if we're serious about that engagement.
Okay, thanks, Katie. So now can we move into the final part of this workshop? You've perfectly led into it by demonstrating the importance of the current piece of work and the problem statements. And this is coming up very soon. 3 December, SPMP is very soon. So yeah, we've got to seriously turn our minds to this now.
Yeah, thank you. So the slides here are hopefully self-explanatory. We've given you just a bit of background about what a problem statement is, what a draft strategic case requirement is from NZTA, and so why we're doing this. We've got a diagram here that talks about the way that we have developed these problem statements, and that really reflects the way from taking that community input with the questions that we ask to them when we ask them about what kind of place they want Cambridge to be for future generations, what they think the biggest transport problems are now, and the solutions we need to meet those community aspirations. And that's what we asked the community at large, our ideas forum and the community reference group. We then took all of that and worked with the community reference group to theme that up. And that's what we fed back to our community. And then we've taken that as staff and then turned that into draft problem statements and reflecting that back with the community reference group so that who've got access to all that community feedback to make sure that we really are translating that into the draft problem statement in a way that reflects the feedback that we got from the community and haven't lost something in translation. The draft problem statements, what we've done in the next 3 slides, we've developed 3 draft problem statements. The next 3 slides give you both what the draft problem statement is and how that matches to the sort of key themes that we heard from the community. So you can see that line of sight travelling through from that feedback to the draft problem statement. And then the final slide simply reiterates those problem statements on one slide so that you can see them in totality. The purpose of today is to ask any questions that you've got about the process by which we might have gone through to give you confidence that we've really reflected what the community has told us along that journey, and then also any feedback about those draft problem statements before we bring them to you at the SPNP meeting on the 3rd of December, and we'll be seeking approval of those, and we'll explain in the paper kind of what we would do with them after that. Yeah.
Roger. Thank you. Having gone previously through problem statements, I understand the process. I've just got kind of three things that I'm going to ask you. How are we considering those in terms of the definition of these problem statements? So bear with me with these three. The first one is in terms of our plan change, recently we changed the allowable height of inner CBD buildings, which in future is going to increase the occupancy and the density and the activity base within the CBD. And yet I'm not seeing any reference to that as an influencer of the problem and the solution that's going to be required. I know we said growth, but I thought that we're referring there to population growth rather than activity growth.
So I think, Roger, that first point is very well covered in the first problem statement, that high growth impacts on the transport network. So if you've got higher density, more people in an area, then you're going to have more trips. And obviously, if they're all in private vehicles, you're going to have increased congestion. But if you provide other transport choices, then you do provide the means for that. So it is whether the growth is spread out across the town or whether it's dense in one place, it's still growth, it's still people having to travel, whether it's to work or school or other things. So there's still that potential problem of increased congestion.
You don't feel it's going to change the nature of the CBD by the type of growth that's going to occur? Like if we've got 6-story buildings in the CBD, that's going to change the very nature of the CBD.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's obviously the outcome. But for the transport planning perspective, the problem and the potential solutions will still be the same. So that I guess that the look and feel of the CBD, that's an ahuaki and it's a district plan and town concept plan type of discussion rather than a purely transport. But it obviously impacts transport, but those other mechanisms of council come into play too.
Okay. My next point is the connectivity with the network. And one of the, I think, quite important aspects is the northern access from Tirau Road, so that we actually have that. I'm wondering whether there is need for specific incorporation of that within the commentary on either of these problem statements.
So certainly that came through in the themes from the public, and it is reflected in problem statement 2, I believe, in that whether it's through traffic or traffic, freight traffic, that at the moment we know that it has to go through the middle of town and residential streets to get where it wants to go. So certainly having a problem statement like number 2 does lead you to look at linkages to the expressway, to major roads. I guess when you think about it, problem statements 1 and 2, as the town grows, there will be more traffic on main routes. If you live in the end of a cul-de-sac, you're not going to see any more traffic in your cul-de-sac, but the main routes that everybody uses to get round will see more traffic. And that's where high growth impacts on the overall network and where does that traffic, where is it routed to? to get to where it needs to go are key themes and the problems here.
Is the timing of the C2P and the fact that that's going to start off in sometime during next year, and the opportunity is there for us to show NZTA that this Northern Access Way from Tirau Road is incorporated? Do we not need to perhaps progress that earlier?
Under the previous council, council has always been advocating for north-facing ramps at Tirau Road, and that's something that we have met with NZTA about. What we have said is that, and we've said this in our advocacy to Minister Upston and Minister Bishop, is that we will model the benefit of north and south-facing ramps as part of Cambridge Connections, and that will be able to inform NZTA. And they know that that work is coming, and we will work with them as that happens. So that option's not foreclosed, and we will consider the benefit of that alongside everything else.
Timeframe consideration.
So timeframe works.
Yeah. Which I think. And my last question, and I think there was a little bit of a reference to it earlier on, that I think there is a community wish out there that, in fact, the current challenges that we have within the network, and we know we've got some pinch points in certain roundabouts in town that are creating considerable congestion. Do we have any priority set within these problem statements that is going to see some addressing of those current issues in the short term, rather than possibly in the longer term that this transport plan is going to envisage?
I can probably answer that one. Yeah. So certainly that, we talked about earlier that this plan is a 30-year plan, but it'll have short-term, medium-term and long-term objectives. And certainly we're hearing from the themes and from the public feedback that they do, point out particular intersections or places where there's more congestion, and they see the value of improvements. So those sort of ideas will come through in the long list, and we do want an overall network plan for Cambridge that shows the types of roads, the type of traffic, where people will need to travel in the future as the town grows. So you will end up with a network plan where you will need improvements over time, including where the bridge is, because it all has to fit together. And then the multi-criteria analysis in terms of which option is best, and what are the benefits you're seeking in what time frame will all help to steer us towards those short and medium term priorities. Because like Alasdair says, if a bridge takes a while to build, the growth pressures will mean that some interim works will be needed about the town to keep things moving because you won't go from go to woe to having your perfect transport network in a short time. That's going to take decades. So what are the interim steps you need to take to keep things moving?
Yeah, and I suppose it is in the definition of what short term. And I don't think the community be wanting to see us saying, well, all right, we're going to deal with that in the short term, which is 5 years' time. Because I think there's a criticality now in terms of dealing with the congestion challenges that we've got.
So I think just to confirm, for the language we're using is short as 0 to 3 years, which is the first 3 years of your long-term plan.
Yeah.
3 to 10 is your medium term, the rest of your long-term plan, and then 10 to 30 is your long-term, beyond that long-term, that LTP cycle.
Okay, so we'll.
So you absolutely, and that will be in the transport plan.
Something will be happening within the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
I'm saying couple, that's 2, but anyway.
Thanks, Roger. You're going to be participating in the LTP, so you will be the master of that amongst the rest of us. Hey, we're going Ion and then Les, and then I'll, you putting your hand up, Shane, it's your last chance, last call, and then, okay, we'll keep going. Ion and then Les, and then I've got a bunch over here.
Nice work. I recognise that trying to come up with these is tricky and condense all of that into such a concise set, and the work that the reference group have done. I think this is a really nice piece of work. Two things that occurred to me that might be out of scope here. So it's thoughts rather than questions, which was, the first is there a space for a socioeconomic lens on this? That's the sort of nature. I know public transport is referenced, but I don't know if that came through from the community reference group, but also like it didn't scream to me that actually we need to make this stuff accessible to everyone, not just necessarily someone with a car. And the second was, I realize there's a 30-year time horizon on this, but if we look back, you know, at where we've been with this, one could say maybe we should have done this 30 years ago. One could say that. So is there an element here where, you know, once bitten, twice shy, understanding it's a 30-year plan, commend it, lines up nicely with the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission work, bigger infrastructure view, so on and so forth. However, is there should we allude to a decision that we might potentially make that actually considers a you know, horizon outside that? I realize the crystal ball gets really hazy at that stage, but you know, is there a gotcha there that says, hey, there's a decision here that really does make an assumption that that might put us at risk? I know that's quite a wide question, but that was general observations for the statements as opposed to specific requests.
Okay. Leave them, happy to leave them as statements?
Happy to leave them as statements.
Thank you. And we get to relitigate this in a couple of weeks. Les.
Yes, I was just wondering, what's on the end of life of the high level bridge? How's that going to affect traffic flows and which, you know, long-term outlook?
Yep. That's a good question. And if you ask a bridge engineer, how long is that bridge going to last? And they'll always say, well, how much money do you want to spend? We'll make it last forever. And hence in France and other places, there's bridge, you know, traffic still traveling across bridges that the Romans built, you know, 2000 years ago. So it is possible to make it last a long time by continuing to work on it. We've had several reports which are available online that talk about the structural strength of the bridge, its resilience to, you know, natural hazards. Also the maintenance that we'll need doing on a regular basis over time. And we know that the concrete deck on the bridge is quite thin, and that is, you know, a significant limitation on the heavy vehicles that can travel on the bridge. Probably when that deck gets to 100 years old in 2060 or so, it may well need another deck on the bridge. But if you look under the bridge, there's lots of old steelwork. There's lots of new steelwork there too that has been put in place to make sure that it keeps carrying traffic and is safe.
Okay, thanks, Brian. We're going Mike, Shane, and then Dean, and then I will call it, okay?
Thanks, Flatt.
Oh, sorry, Claire, you were in there. Sorry, I missed it.
Thanks, Flatt. I've just got a couple of points. Personally, really happy with these problem statements, and that they cover off the growth stuff, the resilience, and obviously the increasing vehicles that are trying to travel through Cambridge, both small and also large. And that growth isn't really going to stop. So, you know, I can see these 10-year plans, and multiple of them, becoming really, really important. And that's increasingly made up by really understanding our growth cells, and not just our growth residential cells, but our changes we're making. And I'm thinking of Carter's Flatt, etc., you know, around the industrial and commercial as stuff shifts out, what shifts in, because that changes a transport network. Your comments about schools, I mean, eventually there are going to be more schools in and around the area. But also picking up on Roger's point of the sort of shorter term, you know, and maybe the thing is, hey, unless you throw a lot of money at something very quickly, if a place is growing, it will get worse before it gets better. So the only way to sort of help with that is, I guess, we put on the infrastructure that we can, and that's that being that physically responsible, and get the money from other places if we can. But it's also up to the community around that sort of hand up, you know, and not just expecting a total handout from us as council, because we're not going to be able to keep up with it. And 30 years is a long time to spend a lot of money. And I'm just looking at this, it's tens and tens of millions of dollars. I'm assuming over this period of time. So we have to actually put a hand up to actually change our mindset, and not just change our mindset in terms of putting it back in the community, but when it comes to LTPs and things, hey, if we want to change our mindset, what do you need from us so we'd actually use it? You know, what do you need from us so we're going to get one person out of one car going to work, for instance? And look, and just to throw it out there, and I talk about if you're not modelling what you teach, you're doing something else. There's many of us that arrive in this building every day from one town, and we pretty much, I think, all travel on single cars. So if we want to model what we teach, we should be starting right here in this room. Because if we're asking the community to make a change, I think we should be trying to lead it up ourselves. So it's a challenge I'll throw out there.
Sure thing.
I'll just quickly respond because it picks up on Pip's question that we said we'd get to as well about the school. The link between land use and transport and that integration is really important. And so we know that, and certainly that's the thing you want to do first. Then you want to make the most of the stuff you've got. You want to manage demand. And the last thing you want to do is build new stuff and provide additional services, because that's where the biggest cost is. That's the way NZTA sets out what they call the intervention hierarchy. That's something that's common across all sectors. And so the relationship between this Cambridge Connections work and the refresh of Waipa 2050, our growth strategy, this year is really, really important. And we're aware of that as staff, because where growth goes, as you say, and including making provisions for schools, making provision for Leamington as a bigger town centre, for example. All of those things need to be considered, because that will impact on where people want to move to, and therefore how they might be able to move around. Yeah.
Brilliant. Councillor St Pierre, over to you. And can I just say, sorry, I missed you. And just an aside from me, the very best thing I can do as chair is follow the conversation really clearly and concentrate really hard. I'm a bloke, I can't do two things at the same time. So can you please get your questions at the order of questions to my governance officer, Claire, who'll slide it across to me. And I just think I'll run a more effective meeting. The moment I start looking around and stop listening, I don't think I'm chairing very well. Okay, Claire.
Thanks, Monty. Well, happy for you to stay in the chair though. Yeah. So I've got three aspects that I wanted to cover. The first is I noticed that evidence is part of the framework that you're preparing your strategic case for. So are you going to be seeking new evidence, or are you using the evidence you've got? And I suppose you're mentioning the growth strategy review. Is that going to be signalled? Yeah, because you know, in the previous process, there were some criticisms about the evidence. So I just wanted to check about, what the evidence is that you will be using, whether it's what we've had, or it's a bit broader, or you're expecting to have some new stuff put in as well.
There will absolutely be additional evidence, and that's about traffic movements, for example, about parking. I mean, there's sort of a range of things that will be getting additional evidence to supplement the work from before. And, I can certainly talk to you about that in detail if you're interested, but we're really conscious that needs to cross all modes as well.
That's great. It'd be good to have a bit more info on that, maybe on the 3rd of December, maybe, I don't know. Sure. The second point was about the setting out of the three statements, and I'm pretty happy with them actually, but I wanted to tease out about the CBD functionality, all right? So it's not quite as strong, I think, as what is in there, because in a way, the ability for that central business district to function, to get people in there and spending money, and for there to be a really economic benefit from the way it works, actually is I suppose the most critical driver for that community long term. And yet it's just mentioned as parking pressures, accessibility, I just think some more work could be done on how important it is to make sure it can function as, you know, an economic, I suppose, marketplace or whatever, I don't know, but yeah, it'd be great if that was
Yes, look,
strengthened.
thank you for that feedback. That
Yeah.
certainly came through really strongly from the community feedback, and we've heard it previously in the town centre concept
Yeah,
plan and
I've
things
heard it a
like
lot
that,
from the
I'm
people I
sure.
talk
So
to.
we'll make
Yeah.
sure that that's reflected
Yeah, cool.
properly through here.
Yeah,
Thank
and then
you.
the last point was on the benefits. So you focused on the problems in that. I'm hoping that some really good detail will be provided on the 3rd of December about the benefits. Yeah,
Yes,
that
it will
you're
be.
anticipating.
So
Yeah, 'cause
yes,
that's an important
in the
component
draft
of it.
strategic case that will come to you, you'll see the problem statements, the benefits, and the investment objectives as well. And those are the things that we'd really like you to focus on the 3rd of December, because the rest of the context and supporting evidence will obviously be able to keep adding to and refining as we go through this
Cool.
process.
No, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, Dean, over to you. Yep.
Thanks very much. So I was going back to something that Ian brought up around the public transport side of things. When and how do we decide when it's better to look at whether we invest money in public transport, and can it be effective over when we invest money in infrastructure and roading? Because I don't really know, but when I went back and looked at the populations, I'm thinking, you know, when I was a kid growing up in Hamilton, the population of Hamilton is probably around about what Cambridge is now or going to be soon. And yet when I used to go and see my grandmother there, we went everywhere on the bus. And okay, people didn't have cars like they do now, but you know, eventually are we not going to have to try and, as both our towns grow, and I know Te Awamutu's behind Cambridge, but you know, we'll get there as well. When do we start trying to get people to do what Mike said and not go everywhere one person, one car at a time? So I don't know, is this part of the scope of this sort of work?
Absolutely. So I'll ask Brian to speak to that and about the order of costs. So understanding those order of costs and thinking about this as a whole transport system, because there's going to be a whole load of things that we need to put together to be able to move it along.
Yeah, so back in 2019, we did a business case for passenger transport here in Waipa, looking at the towns and our connections to Hamilton and between the towns. And so that recommended 3 phases of work. The first phase was to increase the hours and frequency of the buses, which we did in the last contract and moved to electric buses. The next phase was to look at bus services within the towns and connecting the towns as the towns grow and we grow patronage. So that next phase of work is effectively now to look at, as part of this work, to look at how bus services or passenger transport could look in Cambridge in the future. So we're working with the Regional Council at the moment, who is going to do some study, you know, building on that earlier work in 2019, and come up with some options around what would good passenger transport look like for Cambridge. And they'll feed those options back to us in the new year, which we'll be able to incorporate into this work, and also then be able to, when we do public consultation on the overall plan, we'll have some passenger transport options in there for the public to consider.
Okay, thanks. And Shane.
Okay, when I look at the draft problem statements, I mean, they look pretty good to me. But interestingly enough, if you look at statement number 1 and number 2, and you take the word Cambridge out and you add the word Te Awamutu, you have the same problem. In fact, you could argue that because of the width of the main street, the safety aspects with trucks and everything is probably worse than, as higher risk than Cambridge. So my question is that I'm really interested to understand strategically, where are we at with the transport planning for that part of Waipa?
So I can answer that question. So it was, I guess, through the middle of COVID that we did a Te Awamutu strategic roading study, a business case sort of approach, and identified a number of those issues you mentioned. And so that business case has got some actions and potential further work to address those similar issues in Te Awamutu. And so they were, I guess, tentatively included in the previous draft LTP but through the financial pressures, funding to advance those were probably delayed. But I think they will certainly come up again for consideration in the next LTP.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close off that discussion there. Now, just Charlotte, you've been sitting there. Just want to invite you, just if you don't have to say anything, but if you just want to share any thoughts or comments on behalf of the Cambridge Community Board, now would be a good time. Cambridge Community Board's a very important part of this. You remember the wiring diagram? They were there. So any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think from the Community Board perspective, we would like to take a chance to have a look at these problem statements and provide you with feedback. So the timeframe with SPMP is a little bit tricky for us, but we'll do our best around that. I suppose from my perspective, I think it would be Could you just explain, like in terms of these problem statements, why we aren't quantifying the problem so blatantly, like around population increase and that density? I think that, especially in problem statement number 1, we haven't. It's not really too specific around how that will that population growth will increase.
Right. Yeah. So I guess the problem statements, they are designed to be relatively short and sharp. And then that evidence, which you're talking about, how much growth and how much traffic and everything, that evidence gets presented in the draft strategic case. So each of these problem statements does have to have evidence that backs it up to say, well, the population will grow to this much and that will cause this effect on the roading network. So that's where, estimation and transport modelling will be able to tell us, it'll make educated guesses about what, could happen in the future in terms of volumes of traffic and people trying to make trips to different places. So that evidence will certainly come and show in graphs and tables and maps and things. And just be aware when you see the draft strategic case, it is a draft and it'll have lots of yellow splodges of text that say this is a gap and we know it's a gap and we need to gather more evidence here. And so it will develop over time.
Oh, thank you. And Community Reference Group, you've been sitting there very patiently and quietly in the background. I know you have a kind of co-chair arrangement. Chris Flatt and Peter Carr are your co-chairs. I'll just invite you, if you wish to make any comment now, it'd be great. You're, again, a very important part of the wiring diagram. So if one of you, both of you would like to share any thoughts.
Your Worship, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you today and to listen to your reaction to this, for you, initial in-depth document. There is a heap of information that you can't see. Well, you can, but it isn't in here. And not the least of which has been the input from the public by way of the forum, which is a spreadsheet that if we could possibly print it out on one piece of paper, would probably be about the size of this room. It is enormous. And some of it is repetitive, but that's the very nature of people taking this thing to heart. And especially if they felt they were threatened or had not been listened to previously. And now is their opportunity to do that. And so I guess where I'm coming from, is I'm really pleased to see what I would call an open book process taking place. Not only open by virtue of being in this room, by the virtue of, I'm assuming, this is going out to the public through the team's systems and with the media sitting here as well. So I have no gripe about anything that's in here. other than to say, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that there is possibly some low-hanging fruit that can be addressed now. I don't mean today, by the way, but really can be addressed, even if it's the redirection of trucks around a certain route to reduce danger and bottlenecks. The second, what it comes across to me very clearly, I live on the Leamington side of the river. In my postal address is the word Cambridge. Leamington and Cambridge are not separate. Leamington is a constituent part of Cambridge, with possibly at the moment the greater proportion of the population. Yet only has one school. It only has one second level supermarket. People have to travel to the schools, understand all that, causing or promoting, aiding the bottlenecks at least 3 times a day, which are getting longer and rather scary. And sadly, the High Bridge becomes part of that bottleneck, whether we like it or not. And we have the opportunity to remove trucks from that area. Secondly, and only this morning, from the Chamber of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, is a request to the council.
Hey, Peter, I'm going to stop you there.
Yep.
That's right. That's a totally separate matter. So,
okay,
and that's
I
going
can
to
leave
be
that
dealt with elsewhere. So, thank you. Chris, do you have anything you'd just like to add here?
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Chris Flatt, Takuingoa. Thank you. And look, I know I'm in between you and lunch and all of us and lunch and some time to actually talk around some kai. So I won't take too long. Look, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come along today. Just by way of understanding, we have a co-chair arrangement because, as you can see, there's a lot of work here. There's a huge amount of work. There's huge volunteers. I want to thank on behalf of all of the members of the Community Reference Group. We're giving up our time to engage in what is a really important project, and we felt that having a co-chair model was really important to that. We looked at deputy chair or other chairs, but we're going to be phasing in and out. That means we're going to be working very closely, and I want to thank Katie and the team for how much work and support they've given already. It's been incredible. But also, the group, I want to say thanks already. We've had a number of meetings to the group. There's a huge amount of knowledge and talent in that group. I see our role as, and I think one of you picked this up before, not everyone's going to be happy with the outcome. But as someone who does still live in the blue blob, well done on what you've done in Reset. It was a shocker. I'm going to be really frank. From someone who wasn't engaged in this process historically and got to see it all, it was a shocker. It was a textbook of what not to do. What you're doing now is unpacking that, acknowledging that you don't get rid of all of that, but you are unpacking it and bringing it back on track. So thank you for that. And our job as a community reference group, in my view, and Peter's view and others, is not to take your decision-making away. I think that was picked up before. You are the decision makers. You get the big bucks to, jokes, yeah, jokes. You paid the big bucks and the status to make these decisions. Our role is to support and guide and give as much support to you from the community as we can, acknowledging that there's very, very different views on our community reference group. And our role is to bring those together. And we may not have consensus around everything, but to put that to you as decision makers to guide you. So thank you. This has been really useful and look forward to this project. And again, thanks to Katie and the team, amazing team, and all the team at the council for the support. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Now that brings us to a conclusion. This has been a really fabulous workshop, I think. Really great start to this piece of work in this triennium. Long may it continue. Community Reference Group are welcome to join us for lunch afterwards, and you, Charlotte. And Nera, could I ask you to close us off, seeing you opened us? Thank you. Sorry, I've got Steph. Oh. Steph had asked to talk. Sorry. Just before I close this off, can we let the boss speak?
Just quickly, thank you, Monty. Thanks, Chris, Peter and the reference group for being in the house. It's wonderful to have you in here, and to Katie and the team for the work that you've done in the reset that has been acknowledged. Thank you. This is a very, Charlotte, thank you for being here on behalf of the Community Board too. We hope that this is a sign of things to come. This is an invitation. Not an invitation to create by-elections, because now you're starting to get a sense as elected members the complexity of local government, but the invitation for courageous leadership, which Ian put out earlier in this meeting. Interestingly, sometimes I find myself agreeing with Shane Jones, which I would never thought that I would have, even though he was my former boss. But the complexity of infrastructure in New Zealand is holding the country back, and the time it's taking to deliver well-placed, well-funded infrastructure is a significant issue across the country. We're not the only district council dealing with this conundrum. We're not the only district dealing with significant traffic issues. And so what we are going to grapple with over the next 3 years and beyond will be this inherent tension between the ambition behind the fast-track consenting regime, which is to try and cut through infrastructure delivery, unlock housing, jobs, and key infrastructure such as roads, and the tension we have and the importance of taking time with our community to understand what is important, how do we want our communities to look and feel, and to protect and preserve both the current but also the future generational need. And this is not an easy tension to hold together, but it is one we are going to have to be very forthright about and very open. And I guess it's our promise to the community today that that is the way we will address it. We will not please everybody. As Alasdair said, you can't build infrastructure through consensus. It's just the way it is, but we will do our very best to be open and to be very clear about the promise and the ask and where the decisions lie. But I really appreciate Katie for the way that she's delivering this, because it is the classic textbook example of the issues that communities are facing across the country with these tensions, and unlocking the infrastructure we need, but taking the time to have really strong conversations as a community. And then the distinct issue of how are we going to pay for this, which is, next in the agenda. So Monty, I guess just because this is our first council meeting, and with 6 of our newly elected members around the table, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is local government in a nutshell, and the invitation is for these courageous, open conversations, and we look forward to having more of them. And again, just want to thank you all for standing up to be the leaders we need in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Now can I invite Nura to close us off?
Tēnā tātou. On the screens there is our karakia whakamutunga for those new to the room at the elected members retreat earlier this week, led by our mayor. I drafted a couple of karakia for council to use. They're open and available for everyone. They're written by us and for us, so don't worry too much about making mistakes. You're welcome to use these as learning opportunities. And the wero I'd like to leave for the room is that at other hui moving forward, someone else might have a go at these karakia. You're more than welcome to do so. I've written them for us to use as we move forward together. Puritia te rangi Mārie, hei kākahu mō tātou. Puritia te aroha, hei here i a tātou. Puritia te ngākau pono, hei arataki i te mahi mo te hāpori. Puritia ngā wawata kia tupu kia hua. Tēnā kia whakairi ake ke te kōrero ki te tarawhare, haumi e, hui e, tā iki e. I'm going to do an instructional video too, so it's coming. Kia ora.